Hello there, and welcome to another episode of teissTalk with me, your host, Jenny Radcliffe. Today's a great show. We're going to be talking all about being in a state of perpetual breach and whether awareness is the key to fixing that. We're joined by a fantastic panel of guests today. We're joined by, in a moment, Professor Dave Chatterjee, Associate Professor at the University of Georgia, who is the author of the book, which we blatantly stole today's show title from, Cyber Readiness. And later I'm joined by a fab panel. I've got Gary Scobie, who's the Assistant CISO at the University of Edinburgh. I've got Enna Shaheen, who is the Head of Information Security at Federated Hermes. And I've also got Boris Seapot, who's Senior Security Engineer for Synopsys, who are our show sponsors today. So thank you, Synopsys. Don't forget that you can participate in the discussion by putting questions up in the chat or in our question section on the right of the screen, and that the most important thing is that the most involved or best question wins the exclusive teissTalk mug. But for now, I'd like to welcome onto the show our distinguished guest, which is Associate Professor Dave Chatterjee, who has given me permission to call him Dave. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Thank you so much, Jenny.
It's lovely to see you. So, and thank you particularly for giving us the title of our show today, because we stole from your fabulous book the title of being in a perpetual breach. So maybe you could talk to me first of all about what exactly you mean by that. Are we in that state? What do you mean?
When I mentioned when I used that phrase that we are in a perpetual state of breach, that essentially reflects the vulnerabilities that individuals, that organizations are facing in an extremely digitized world, is an extremely mobile world where people are traveling for work, and especially now with the COVID time period, people are working remotely. So the opportunities for the hackers to try to exploit different vulnerabilities at the process level, at the people level, the technology level, keeps expanding. We were talking about the account takeover attacks, one of the latest innovations. It just keeps happening. So the challenge is, how do you stay on top of things? How you deal with this epidemic head on by recognizing that this is the cost of doing business today. You cannot ignore it. You have to face it. But the approach has to be holistic, has to be multi-pronged, as opposed to just a myopic, technology-centric approach.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the COVID, and I wanted to pick you up on that straight away, because in a way, what you say in the book is it kind of took a major calamity like the pandemic to remind us, I think I'm quoting you almost directly, hopefully I am, to remind us of the consequences of being underprepared. And I suppose on this show, we've spoken a lot about the pandemic and about its effect on cybersecurity, obviously. And one of the things that came out was it did force innovation. It did force a new way of thinking. Do you feel like it was in some ways a blessing? Is it a shame it had to get to that? Was it a blessing in the end that it did?
Well, in our life's journey, I believe things happen for a reason. And often we have to go through pain to recognize what are the deficiencies, how to address them, and how to get better. What the coronavirus pandemic has shown us is how woefully underprepared we were, how we are reacting to the epidemic. Cybersecurity can have even more significant negative consequences. It can be disastrous. Warren Buffett has saying that the cyber attacks pose even greater threats than nuclear attacks. So it is imperative for organizations, for individuals, to take a very proactive, very thorough, very deliberative stance. And I have every opportunity I get to speak to C-level executives, I encourage them to consider cybersecurity capability as a strategic capability, as a core competency, and work towards developing it. The approach should not be driven by mandates or legislations.
No.
The approach should not be, let's check the box. The approach should be genuine, substantive, rigorous, and proactive. If you take that kind of an approach, you're likely to fare better. There is no immunization for cyber attacks, but at least you should be able to claim, maybe in a court of law, that you've done everything possible to secure data, to secure your critical assets. Yeah.
Right. I mean, we spoke about that in the prep yesterday, because that was one of the things that I said to you, is the idea of, so things are going to go wrong. You're going to be the one that gets asked the questions. You're a CISO or you're an information officer of some kind. And what I said to you is, I always say to people, can you get to the stage where you can look at them and say, this is what I did. Tell me what else I could have done. And feel like you did everything you could think of, everything that you were supposed to do. I mean, that's really, we're on the same page about that, I think.
You are spot on. Once again, I want to emphasize the approach needs to be genuine, thorough. It should not be, let's check off the box. Oh, we are required to do security training. We hired somebody, they did their thing, they're out, we check it off. You're never going to achieve the real benefits.
And I mean, sorry, I interrupted, but I was going to say, you mentioned their holistic approach. And I think one of the things that, we're going to pick up on this as our topic with the rest of the panel, because we've got a great panel to add to your comments here. But what you mentioned, holistic approach, and you also talk a lot about in the book about going beyond those silos, the approach coming from the top. We have a lot of CISOs who come on the show as guests, but also in our lovely audience today, which I'm just waving to now. They're all talking in the chat, mentioning your bow tie, and that they want the mug. Hello, everyone. But we talk to a lot of people on the show who are in that kind of position, and one of the things that comes up over and over again is the idea of bringing the wider business into this and moving away from the function, communicating with the boards. And it just struck me that, when I read the book and read past the book and watched your interviews, this is what you're talking about, isn't it? You're talking about everyone taking this on board.
Cybersecurity is everyone's business. It's perfectly fine to have the CISO function, the CISO team leading the way. But unless everyone does their part, unless there is joint ownership, joint accountability, once again, we will fall way short. Unfortunately, corporate business take a very symbolic kind of an approach. When something goes wrong, well, let's fire the CISO. Well, firing the CISO is always not the solution. You have to dig deeper. What's the real problem? Is it procedural? Is it training related? There's so many things that can go wrong. When I talk about creating and sustaining a high performance information security culture, that entails at a high level creating and sustaining 3 traits of commitment, preparedness, and discipline. And when I was doing my research for the last several years, gathering data, analyzing data, 17 success factors came out. And each success factor has sub-success factors. The point I'm trying to make is it's very hard to create and sustain an information security culture from an ideal perspective. But it is a step in the right direction. Even if companies can forge in that direction and are at 60 to 70% realizing that potential, they're better off than ignoring it and taking the traditional myopic, technocentric approach. Okay, we'll just throw tools at it. That won't cut it. People are a huge part of the equation.
So did you see over the course of the last year, was there anything that kind of surprised you in a positive way about it? Did you see innovation? Did you see people starting to take that approach, even if it was out of necessity? And just to say, Dave, before we go any further, we've got Priyo and Ria, I think, saying hello. Hi, Dad. Just hi, that's so sweet. Was there any positive things that came out of it? Did you see businesses sort of having to switch to this and then seeing the benefits?
Well, from a positive standpoint, I've been working in this area for almost a decade now, and I've been tracking surveys. gathering data. There is definitely a significant improvement from a top management recognition standpoint. Top management is way more engaged now than ever before. There is a growing level of awareness that this is something that everyone needs to recognize and do something about. Now, granted that businesses don't exist to secure data. That's not the reason they exist. They exist to achieve their purpose. But as I said earlier, cybersecurity is a cost of doing business. You have to secure yourself. You have to constantly stay on top of your game. And that's where I definitely see progress. Even when companies have gone remote, the exemplars have laid down excellent guidelines and protocols to be followed, instructing their employees how to access data, where to store data. Now, does that mean that's foolproof? It's not. But it's, again, the step in the right direction. The whole purpose of this exercise, where we are engaging in this discussion, is to emphasize things that are being done, to recommend things that the practitioners are probably thinking about it, but now hopefully they will take that extra step. So just to keep raising the level of awareness, because cybersecurity is a moving target.
Yeah.
And we have to keep getting better at it.
Because the criminals do, right?
It's an industry. Hacking is an industry. It's a sophisticated industry. People get a ton of money to launch attacks. And they are
worth it.
Yeah, I mean, they are in the business to do that. Companies are not in the business to constantly be assessing where they are and how do we prevent such attacks. Companies have work to do, but unfortunately, they still have to keep track of this challenge and cope with this challenge.
Well, absolutely. And I think we are, I'm dying to bring in our panel and talk about this article, because our article absolutely supports everything that you're saying, I think. And I know our panel do. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring in our panel. We have, once again, we have Gary Scobie, Anna Shaheen, and Boris Siput from the University of Edinburgh, Federated Hermes, and Synopsys, respectively. Hello, folks. Welcome to the show. Hey, Boris. Hi, Gary. There we go. And I'm sure you were just listening to the Prof's comments there, to Dr. Shastri's promise, and seeing his lovely Julian saying hello. You can say hello back in the chat if you like to. But I want to get on to this article and then expand a little bit more on our general topic, guys, because the article that we're looking at today, and our teissTalk elves are going to put it up on the screen for everyone to see very shortly, is based around a report. It was from HelpNet Security Sites, based around a report from, I think, Vectra and HelpNet. But what it said was really kind of quite shocking in some ways, because in this report, it said that 3 out of 4 companies have experienced account takeover attacks in the last year. So there's 75% of companies have experienced these attacks, but not once, on average 7 times per company in the last year. I mean, maybe if I can come to Gary Scobie first. Gary, were you alarmed by that? Was it a surprise?
No. I work in academia, so from my perspective, that isn't a surprise. It's we still see a lot of account sharing, password sharing. You know, I have a churn rate of roughly 5,000 students a year. So, you know, we do awareness through the year, and then every year we've got another maybe 5,000 people that will come in who don't know anything about our awareness, and we're almost like starting from scratch again. So it's hard. So it's not surprising. Whether the article is suggesting that it's overtaking phishing as the main attack vector, I'm not convinced of that, because many account takeovers start off as a result of a phish.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was something I was going to touch on, obviously, because I mean, as a social engineer, I'd be devastated if phishing started to go out of hand.
No, it's phishing is not. Phishing's going away.
What you do? I mean, is phishing going away? Ennis?
No, it's not. It's not going away. Not going away.
What do you think?
I'm going to use a martial arts analogy here.
Oh, lovely. I do like a martial arts analogy.
You got to bring physical security into cybersecurity, right?
Absolutely.
So in fighting, there's this concept of unforced errors versus forced errors. So if you're fighting a low-level competitor, you don't need to force them to make errors because they will make one, and you can capitalize on those. Whereas if you're fighting someone who's more experienced, you have to force those errors so you can exploit them. So I see the average IT user as a white belt, right? They will make unforced errors, which you can capitalize on. So you don't necessarily need to do phishing attacks or work on your social engineering chops. They will make errors, and account sharing and easy to guess passwords, weak passwords. These are all mistakes that they do. So rather than spending your time trying to craft these phishing attacks, which people know that they should look out for,
Absolutely,
just go after the unforced errors that they make anyways.
Yeah, I mean it's an art form. What can I say? It's a dying art. But I mean, Boris, I saw you laughing there when I said, you know, whether fishing was going to go away anytime soon. I guess I agree with Ennis and Gary. It's not that it's necessarily going out of fashion. The article actually says, one of the commentators in the article, a guy called Tim Wade from Vector, said they're seeing it and they're starting to worry that it actually will take over from fishing. I mean, did you think maybe it's just he was alarmed by the stats in the report? What do you think, Boris?
Well, I don't think that social engineering or phishing or any of those things will go away, because it is the trailer that is bringing those things above, right? And as Ennis said also, we are seeing that in software development, there are many mistakes made when somebody wants to test something that will go into production. They will test it in pre-production, and they will not even deploy security measures needed in the production stage, right? So the hackers are capitalizing of those mistakes that they're doing in the testing phases. And this is actually all over the news, that they are posting unprotected S3 buckets or whatever, right? And then the hackers are capitalizing of those. However, the not dying art of social engineering or phishing will always be there, because somebody will try to trick somebody from a company also to get his access to enter the company's network, right? And then smartphones, smart watches and everything is another way to get into those networks, right?
Right. And I mean, I'm sure that Dave's got something to say on this, because in the article, they actually said that only 1 in 3, and I'm interested in what our audience have got to say about this. I'm interested in questions about it. But in the article, David said that only 1 in 3 security professionals believe that they could identify and stop an account takeover attack immediately. The majority of professionals that they questioned said it would be weeks or even months before they were confident that they could stop it. This is about readiness again, isn't it, Dave?
Absolutely. And in fact, I'd like to make 2 points, kind of piggybacking off Boris. There is one of the things I emphasize in the book is creating a collaborative relationship between business and IT. If you think in terms of the security team and the software development team, they need to be working hand in hand, but that's not really what happens. They're driven by different metrics, and as a result, often products get released where the security is not top-notch. The other point is this particular article refers to this attack. This is a type of an ID theft, which is exploiting human vulnerabilities. So to your point that will phishing go away and something else will come in, we're still talking about exploiting human vulnerabilities. It's just another form of attack. In this particular case, what happened, the customers were exploited, their credentials were stolen. And this brings up an even bigger challenge. Companies not only have to secure their own, they also have to try and ensure that their business partners, their suppliers, their customers also are maintaining a certain security standard. How do you ensure that? How do you monitor that? That's a huge challenge. But again, you have to do the best you can, when you are evaluating people, partners, how you will do business, where you're coming up with your SLA agreements. So there are steps that you can take. There has to be monitoring. There has to be oversight. A lot of things have to happen. And that speaks to the preparedness aspect of the information security culture that I talk about in my book.
Absolutely. I mean, Ennis, third party supply chain, Hermes that must be a huge challenge for you guys, Hermes.
It is a huge challenge, and I think it is a huge challenge for anyone today. And it's one of the areas that actually show that security goes beyond the realm of IT, because supply risk management is a firm-wide challenge, right? And if you don't have a certain level of maturity in that area, how can you expect your security team to keep tabs on your suppliers from a cybersecurity point of view?
Absolutely.
There's definitely the dependency on the organizational maturity to keep tabs on third-party suppliers, and as an extension of that, there's sort of third-party IT services that are being used across an organization. It's a massive challenge.
It's massive. And I mean, the guy from Vector said, I mean, it made me laugh because what he said was so obvious in the article, but he said, cited that orgs need to take this seriously and plan to better their detection capability. And I mean, he's not wrong, is he, Gary? I mean, of course we need to get better. I think part of Dave's point is that it's a journey, isn't it? You know?
Yeah, he's not wrong. I mean, I'd like us to jump back a second there. The NCSC here is producing, or has now produced, guidance on third-party supply chain. And it's producing a whole series of checklists and questionnaires that you can use to try and manage that whole aspect of security. So that's worth bearing in mind. But no, the difficulty with account takeover is if the attacker is sensible and it is clever enough, their behaviour inside your network is just going to look normal behaviour. This whole living off the land thing is extremely worrying. In my own environment, people, exfiltrating data out to Google Docs or Dropbox or OneDrive or whatever through a firewall is normal behaviour. And it's being able to detect that abnormal behaviour is extremely difficult. Now, and I can imagine in a bank, somebody talking to some random country at 3 o'clock in the morning would probably raise a red flag. But in my environment, that's entirely normal.
That's because you're dealing with academics who do all sorts of crazy things.
That's entirely normal. So to try and baseline our network and what is normal is incredibly difficult.
But Boris, I'm assuming that that's difficult across the board. Once COVID hit, everybody's baseline surely changed. I mean, we were talking about this on the show a couple of weeks ago. The baseline's changed for everyone. So for Gary, he's got no real baseline because everyone just does as they want because they're academics. But I mean, would you say that? Oh, okay. I'm putting words in your mouth. I'm joking. But I mean, everyone's habits changed, Boris, didn't they?
Yeah, but I think that we are changing many times in the wrong perspective. Just think about this. When somebody complains to the company that they have to enter the PIN code and this takes too many steps, what will the action of the company be? They remove the PIN code, right? To just make it easier for the users to use their applications. And we've seen this in application security, that many of the security parameters are deemed to be paranoid too much, right? And they are hitting too much on the usability, right? And if I now piggyback on Gary's point, banks have really strict security measures, and they are many times also seen as too paranoid, right, by today's work life, right? But actually, we should move into this paranoid state and make this paranoid state as a way to go, and then try to figure out how to live with this, that the usability is improved, right? But nobody is putting money on this. Nobody's trying to make security more usable. Everybody's just complaining that security is so hard. So,
I mean, we've got comments. We've got one of our regular audience members, Robin, saying healthy paranoia over in the chat. And I mean, like I say, guys, do try and think of some questions for us. We will ask the panel those questions and we'll talk about your comments. You're very welcome to join the discussion. But I just, to pick up on Boris's point, Dave, I mean, isn't this the thing that it shouldn't be a cost center? It should be a competitive advantage, right? I mean, that's what we all want.
Absolutely.
How do we convince them though?
Mm-hmm. And that speaks to what I mentioned earlier, that you look at cybersecurity as a strategic capability, as a core competency. Yes, that's not why you are in the business, but that could easily determine how long you are in the business. You could go out of business. And to Boris's point, where he talked about being more kind of, because there is this traction between convenience and security. The more secure we try to get, the more inconvenient it becomes. And history tells us that we humans, we love convenience. And we will do anything for the sake of convenience. So as much as we might have this discussion of privacy, security, but at some point, people are like, enough is enough. Let's just enjoy the benefits of digitization. If in the process security gets compromised, so be it. Now, I'm making it a lighter statement, but that's the challenge, is how secure is good enough and how acceptable is it for, say, the customers, for the users. So that's another aspect of security governance that needs a lot of thought, and we have ways to go in that area.
Would you agree with that, Gary? I see you nodding there.
Yeah. I mean, we're in a culture now where security versus convenience. It's far easier for people. We've built apps that, as long as people just accept the conditions, which they don't read, and as long as they, if they can log in using their Facebook account, and all they have to do is one click and it's all done, then that is the way the industry has gone. And unfortunately, but we're trying to do security on the one hand with an industry that is geared to making things as seamless as possible, so customers don't actually know what's going on behind the scenes with the software that they're running, that they're using in their everyday lives. And this is a real problem, because we want people to understand what they're signing up for, but currently we accept that 100 pages of terms and conditions. None of us around this panel are, well, we've all possibly had a look through them at some point or another.
Can I just say, I did have a look through them, and on page 122, you sell Apple your kidney, or whoever. It's all right for whoever it is to just take your kidney if you do anything wrong. No, I'm joking. There are. That's true of everybody. I didn't mean to say brand name then. So, I mean, I think it's true. And we've got a question just about convenience has come up in the chat, which says, it's from Danielle, and I hope I've said that right, Danielle. But it says, speaking of convenience, what's everyone's thoughts on things like password managers like LastPass and iCloud and Keychain? I mean, I get this question a lot. We've got John Nurse saying he uses Keeper, personal, not business, never have to remember the password. I mean, do we do a good enough job of saying to people that saying to users, and I'm looking at Gary just again, particularly because I know he's got so many of them constantly changing. Do we do a good enough job in security to say there are convenient ways to be secure when they're there? Or do you think that we kind of get lost in the panic of the user experience? What do you think?
Well, I think password managers are a good thing, and it's certainly we are rolling one out. We provide a password manager to our students now, mainly because of the problems that we had with password reuse in students. And I get it. They have to have at least, I mean, what's the average person got now? 50, 60, 70 accounts and all sorts of things. You can't do anything nowadays without creating an account and having a password. So it was to get around that. So I mean, I recognise that, we could debate all day about the pros and cons of password managers and are they good or bad. But generally speaking, for most people, what we're finding is a good thing, because at least it is taking away this password reuse.
But just as long as the effort required isn't as huge.
Yeah.
Because you know what it reminds me of? You know when you got on busy roads and you've got the railings along both sides of the pavement, and then you want to cross the road and you have to walk all the way down to the crossing, and there comes a point when you jump that fence if you're capable of doing so. I'm just saying. Okay, so just
can I add something to that? Can I add something to the password?
Absolutely.
So let me share with you something that the solution developers will not be happy to hear.
Okay.
I'm a fan of not writing down your passwords. I'm a fan of not using a password manager. I'm a fan of trying to remember your passwords, keep a few, have very strong passwords, preferably passphrases. And if you forget, come up with a new one. But don't write it anywhere. And this is not probably something that you will hear. I think I'm probably one of the only proponents of this, but I think that's the really way to go if you want to reduce the probability of breaches. Because if you use password managers, even they can be, even those directories can be breached. So.
Well, as a social engineer, I love it when people write the passwords down in the office. But I think at home, I often say to people, depending on your threat landscape, if you've got people who trust everyone they live with and are living in a situation, surely sometimes writing it down is better than using a weak one. I mean, I think I always feel this is a customized solution. Isn't this part of it, that we've not got a one size fits all anyway? For sort of grandpa and grandma, maybe they should write a long password down, because otherwise they're going to forget it and use passwords 1, 2, 3 or something like that. That's my view on it, but no one wants to hear my view. I'm just the host and I need to ask you people better questions. So we've got a few comments coming in. We've got one from Priyo saying the holy grail is how do you train the customer to be cognizant of security? How do you ensure the CISO, for whom security is top of mind, to be cognizant of convenience? And I think that's a really good point, that we have to really think about that as well. We can't just say, oh, well, you've got to sacrifice convenience for security without trying to understand that perspective. It's about empathy sometimes, I think. Ennis, would you say that? Would you say trying to look at it from the user's point of view is going to be useful in these circumstances?
Absolutely. I'm a former penetration tester, and obviously, as a pen tester, you're supposed to have that sort of mindset of the attacker. I think when you transition into a CISO type of role, you should have the mindset of just the average user and the lengths that they can go to just to circumvent processes. And every day I get my mind blown. It's hard to imagine how people will behave just to make life easy for themselves. I mean, the stuff that they can come up with, it's really hard to sometimes sympathize with people's thinking if you're in the security world. But it is definitely a big consideration. I said sort of the average user, I see them as white belts. It's true to an extent, but for some of the basic stuff, I mean, people know. I also think that they don't care, which is a bigger problem.
That is a bigger problem. And we've got some comments coming up here just before we move off this and go on to our general topic just for a little while. But you guys are making me laugh in the chat. We've got Neil saying, people used to have to remember phone numbers and remember dozens of them. And that is so true. That is so true. And we've got Lee saying I was better at remembering numbers than I remember the old number of my old house from when I was a kid. Like right off the top of my head, I struggle to remember all the mobile phone numbers. I probably couldn't do it now, only my own.
Or what about getting a date scheduled 1 week in advance, right? And today we can't do it even 1 hour before that. So
no, it's funny. Our dependency on the tech has sort of made us, I mean, as Chris points out, we're a lot lazier now. Mark is saying people seeking the path of least resistance. And actually, Chris's point was, but you had to. It was essential. You had to. I mean, I remember Mum and Dad drilling our home number into me in case I ever got lost or anything like that. I had to remember our number. So it's all very interesting, and that's that article. And the article, really kind of got me thinking a little bit about this whole theme of it today, about this state of perpetual breach. That that phrase is such a great phrase that obviously we nicked it just for the show, but like the prof is on, so that's okay. Would we agree? Maybe go to Boris now. Would we agree we're in a state of perpetual breach? I haven't heard Dave's explanation. Do you think we are?
Yeah, I would say so. There is not one hacker that wants to get you, you know, like there is not only one hacker out there that wants to get to your money or to the company. There are nation state hackers. There are hacker industries, as was mentioned before, right?
Yeah.
So we are in a perpetual state of being attacked, either as personal people or as employees of a company. So we need to be aware of this. And there I agree also with the previous point that education for people would be the best way to go after it. However, as Annie said, mostly people don't care about those things.
No, I mean that's the problem, isn't it? I mean, Gary, when we talk about this, one of the things that we tend to say, and I know that Dave says the same thing in the book, is that awareness is key. But I know you had a little story about awareness, didn't you? And about because my point was when we sort of did the prep for this was I think that it's a bit trite just to say that you know, humans are the weakest link, or that awareness is key. We have to be more specific. But tell us the story. You know, you had a little anecdote about awareness, didn't you? Yesterday about, was it a plumber?
Oh yes, it was the.
I just noticed you panicking there.
Yeah.
What anecdote was that, Jen? Oh, okay.
Which anecdote do I have? It's the. It was on that end of that article where it would seem that there was an awful lot of concern that from security professionals that users are not cyber aware.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then I used the anecdote about when my heating broke down 2 weeks ago, and the plumber turned up. He wasn't concerned about my lack of knowledge of my heating system.
No,
you know, he just kind of accepted the fact that I didn't know how to do the 2-minute job that he charged me £80 for.
Yeah,
and
they're all in the wrong game.
Quite yeah, plumbing is the game. You know, it is the game. There's no doubt about it. But and it's an interesting thing with awareness, because I do a lot of awareness, and it's part of my role. But I'm finding that in my environment, we do have academics at the top of their field. They're absolutely world class, and I cannot be, I can't get upset or distressed by their lack of cyber knowledge in a sense, because they look to me to make sure that they can do what they need to do securely, and they don't have to worry about it because they've got enough to worry about in terms of their own field and their own level of expertise. And it's an interesting thing. We are, in my own environment, we are now seeing senior staff attending my awareness sessions. And that's been a big change over the last year, because it was always people and staff and colleagues in the lower grades that were coming along to my awareness sessions every week. We never ever had any senior staff at all.
Perhaps it's because we've all got better attendance because they can't really run away.
True, there is that.
We've got them exactly where we want them. We quickly take the opportunity. But I wanted to come back to Dave just briefly and say, part of your narrative in the book and beyond is about the fact that, the threats keep evolving, and certainly we've all seen, I'm sure, throughout the last year, the scripts of the attackers are changing, the methodologies are changing. I think the goals tend to be the same. So what I was going to ask Dave was how can you even keep up with awareness? And I'll come to the rest of the panel in a minute. We've just about got the users understanding phishing, and maybe a little bit about spear phishing. And now we're going to tell them it's account takeover. Your credentials have been leaked and stolen anyway. I mean, can awareness keep up with the attackers, Dave?
And that's exactly the reason why training and awareness needs to be a continuous process and not a one-shot process. Again, I want to emphasize, do not just check off the box and say, okay, we've had X number of hours of training, and that's good. I'm a university professor. I know how security training is done. I'm not going to kind of accuse anybody of anything, but that's not the way you do it, because that's like a one-shot stop, and I have several workarounds of not really properly doing that training. So there has to be assessments, there has to be incentives, for lack of a better word, penalties for not being or getting to that level of awareness. So several steps have to be taken to make training more effective. And of course, training needs to be interactive. Use games, use dramatic scenarios, make it fun, make it engaging. There's a lot of great research on what good training is. That's the difference between, we train or we communicate. There's a difference between communication and good communication, training and good training. That's the difference. It's not like we do not have enough guidance on what to do to be more secure. It's how well we execute. And the ability to execute consistently at a high level and with precision, in my humble opinion, based on the data that I have gathered, depends on creating and sustaining a high-performance information security culture, which is characterized by those 3 traits of commitment, preparedness, and discipline.
Yeah, I mean, we've got some comments here. I'm going to come to the rest of the panel in a minute on that very thing about awareness and training. We've got some great comments here. We've got John saying training is always used as a punishment. Well, I mean, I do train. I don't feel like they're being punished when I'm doing the training. And then we've got Lee talking about, but I think he makes a very good point. I think it can be. We've got breach. Now you're all going to sit through this pull-through training. We've got Lee saying that people will avoid training unless they feel it's personal. It's something to do with the bonus. It's of interest. It's easy. And Chris as well saying it's constant, not static. Key point Dave raises. I mean, I don't know the rest of the panel. Anyone got any comments on this? Because we need, none taken. No offense taken, John. Goodness me. But we need, don't we, to always have our eye on the ball on awareness. We can't just do it once a year. We can't just have a one size fits all. Surely we're beyond that now.
Yeah, but training needs to be used as awareness only. You cannot beat years of, let's say it like this, university training or CISP trainings into 1 hour course to a person that doesn't have any technical knowledge, right? So it should not be training where they have to be experts on what somebody else is doing. However, they need to be aware that this measurement here is for their benefit, that they know why, for example, now working from home, they cannot just open, an internal resource before they are switching on VPN.
Yeah.
They need to be aware why they need to be in a secure tunnel, why they need to use HTTPS, why they need to have long passwords. It's all for their benefit. And once they're aware, it makes it easier for people like Gary maybe or Anis or whoever to explain to them, okay, this is why we need to do that. It will not work on everybody for sure, but at least this awareness gives them the point on, okay, this is why I should not share this Word document on Google Docs because it has internal IP in it, right? So
right. Because and I think this is kind of really, I'm going to come to you over just some final thoughts in a minute, but I think this is really the key to it, isn't it? If we want people to not do the easy things, we want them to do the secure thing. I love the point that Boris made of it's not just what they have to do, but it's why and what the benefit is. I mean, I see Ennis nodding. I mean, would you agree with that, Ennis? And maybe some final thoughts?
Well, absolutely. One of the key principles of leadership for me is to explain the why. If people understand the why, they will come along the journey with you. So coming back to what I said earlier, I think making people care about security is a more important challenge than the training and awareness piece, because if they care, then they're engaged. Yeah. And if they're engaged, they will find the right information for themselves. They will make the right decisions, and then they're on the right path.
Yeah, and I mean, we've got a comment here from Lee, who's one of our regular audience members, and he says, there was click-through training that worked for almost all staff in his last firm. So it's that, again, it's tailoring, isn't it, to what you see that they'll absorb, Gary? I mean, would you agree with that? It's like we've got to work out what works, adapt ourselves, not expect them to adapt to us.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We have particular challenges in the sense that our user base is one of the most diverse you could probably ever come across. And which is why we do our own security awareness training, because none of the training packages that we looked at commercially actually took into account the diversity and the accessibility issues of our people, basically. Yeah. And this was a real surprise to me, because I assumed that companies would be keeping this in mind when they're producing their packages, but they weren't. And it's so it's something that we're very conscious of, because you can't just assume. I'll give a very quick example. I'm from central Scotland. I have a particular sense of humour, and that humour may work with some people, but it's certainly not going to work with everybody.
No, and I mean, this is one of the points that Lee Morton made earlier on, and it's so true, I think, is that different cultures, different things work, different, and that's culture. And I'm sure Dave's got something to add on this, and I'm going to come to you next, Dave, for some final thoughts and a comment. But depending on where you are in the world, and depending on what industry, what's appropriate, what's funny, all of those things just change massively, don't they? You can't always, because I would rely on humour a lot in training and in other things, but only very carefully. Because I know it doesn't always translate. I mean, David, what's your final thoughts on that and on the topic generally, perhaps?
Well, I'll keep it very simple. First, cybersecurity governance is not easy. Yeah. It's challenging. It's one of those battles that you have to constantly fight and do the best you can. Have to take a holistic approach. People, process, and technology-driven measures, not one over the other. And constantly improve the level of awareness. So to summarize, 3 things I'd like to leave the audience with. How committed is the leadership? How robust are the governance procedures? How motivated are the personnel? Easier said than done, but this is the way to go. There are several actionable measures under each of these categories. Hopefully, my book will shed some light on how to go about doing this, but it's definitely, that's the approach to take if you want to truly have an impact, as opposed to a symbolic reaction and then firing a bunch of people and okay, we've dealt with it. Take a more substantive, a more genuine, a more committed, a more proactive, a more deliberate approach.
I think that for me, I mean, otherwise, what's the point, really? Otherwise, what's the point? Boris, have you got any final words for us? And Dave, you might want to just hold that book up. Dave's book is behind and very nicely displayed. And I said, we want to pretend we're on Jimmy Fallon and we're showing it. Cyber Readiness. Cyber Readiness, available from all good outlets. Fabulous book. Boris, final words.
Yeah, I would close down with your tattoo on your right hand, right? If you can show this one, facta non verba. So act, don't speak, right? Yeah. So everybody has to take their place in this game. Is it the user? Is the company providing something? Is the employee? Everybody has this his place in security, and this is how it is. Everybody has to make or break, right?
Absolutely. Well, I think that's just been an amazing show. Hold it up, Dave. Hold it up. A fabulous discussion. Always love speaking to a panel like this. So I just want to say thank you very much to all of our panel, to Gary Scobie, Enna Shaheen, Boris Seapart, and to Dave Chatterjee. I want to say thank you particularly to our lovely audience today. And before we go, thank you also to our sponsor today, which is Synopsys. So thank you, Synopsys, for your kind sponsorship of the show. For me to award our mug today, there was, for me, there could only really be one person who won this today. And it was for a brief but cheerful comment. So I want to award the mug today to the Chatterjee household, and particularly to Ria, for the comment a couple of minutes in, hi, Dad. So it's just like, oh, that's so lovely. So that's why we had a great show today. Thank you again to everyone. And we'll see you all next time for another edition of teissTalk.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.